Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Sally Hepworth. Sally is the New York Times bestselling author of 9 novels, including The Good Sister and The Soulmate. Drawing on the good, the bad, and the downright odd of human behavior, Sally writes incisively about family, relationships, and identity. Her domestic thriller novels are laced with quirky humor, sass, and a darkly charming tone. They are available worldwide in English and have been translated into 20 languages. Sally lives in Melbourne, Australia, with her family and 1 adorable dog. Welcome, Sally.
Hello, it's so lovely to be here. I'm a huge fan of the podcast and of you, and I love how this world helps us connect from so far away.
I do too, Sally. I'm so happy. I was thinking before we started this podcast that I'm ready for like a cocktail because it's 5 o'clock for me, but you're probably still drinking your morning coffee. You're not having cocktails quite yet.
Sadly not. No, I've got a glass of water, and yes, I just finished my coffee.
Well, there you go. Well, that's probably, at least you're not having a cocktail this morning. So I told you also before we started, first of all, this is such a gorgeous cover. And I love the cover they did of the, I love your Australian cover too. It's also super gorgeous. They're really, it's same color scheme, which I thought was fun.
It made it easy for me to buy the outfits to match the book. And so I can just wear it, all over the world.
I love that.
Yeah, and the nails as well. I'm going to get my nails done before I come and tour the States. But I've been so lucky with my covers in all countries, and I just think this one's really intriguing, and it does remind me of the book, but also feels like something I'd pick up. And yeah, I'm really happy with it.
Exactly. You're going to see this all over the airports, everyone. And there'll be a copy that we give away on our Killer Women page on Facebook. So stay tuned for that. But I just telling Sally, this is my favorite Sally Hepworth book. And I don't know, there's not a moment I can say about any of the other ones I've read that were like, oh, this wasn't my favorite. It was just that when I read this one, I was like, ooh, because it's all your fabulousness and a little different. Don't you think? I mean, yeah. So tell our listeners before we dive into that, tell our listeners about Darling Girls.
Yes, thank you for saying that. That's the right answer. As you know, we always want our
of course,
favorite. So thank you for that. No, look, this book, it's about family dysfunctionality, which will surprise, exactly no one, because that is what I write about. And this book is about sisters, but it is different from, for example, The Good Sister, which I wrote, because these sisters aren't related. And the reason that they're sisters is they grew up together in foster care as little girls. And the 3 sisters are Jessica, who is, first of all, a really type A personality. She's super neurotic, super organized. She runs a home organization business where she goes to people's homes, and she she sorts them out and gets everything color coded and looking fabulous. I actually need her for my house. She is really moving well on the surface, and then what we find out very quickly in the first page, in fact, is that she has developed a little habit of taking things from people's bathroom cabinets, and specifically medicine. And her preference is Valium, and
who doesn't love Valium?
I know. So especially for highly neurotic people, I think it's the better choice. So immediately we're kind of thinking, wow, well, what's happened with Jessica? The second sister is Nora, and Nora is possibly my favorite character that I've ever written. She's the opposite of Jessica. She's really quite rigid in her thinking, and she's super smart. She's not so occasionally violent, which I shouldn't be laughing at, but you'll understand if you read.
No, don't cross Nora. She's but she's fiercely defensive of her siblings, which I love. Right? There's that loyalty.
She's got a heart of gold, and but her upbringing in foster care has had the effect on her that she does protect herself. She protects her own, and she's developed a very a very interesting relationship with sex, where she considers it a really handy way to get odd jobs done around the house.
Which is kind of clever, to be honest, right? I need to have, I need my plumbing fixed. Well, here's a way to do it. I love that. That is, that's so great.
She's also got 3 dogs, which became more of a piece of the novel than I expected to, as they got a life of their own.
Well, they're very big dogs. She doesn't have like 3 small dogs. She has 3 slobbering big dogs, which is so fabulous. And of course, when you put Jessica's type A with Nora's big dogs, it's your humor. It's so fun.
Well, it helps to lighten what can be a dark book in some parts. But and then we have the final sister, Alicia, who is on the surface the most stable of the 3. She is a social worker. She's come out of her background in foster care, and she wants to make a difference, and she is wonderful at what she does. And she's funny, and she kind of brings people together and puts them at ease. But she's got some wounds, as they all do, and hers are to do with what she believes about herself and how worthy she is, and how that affects her in having relationships. But despite all of these kind of wounds that these 3 sisters have brought with them, they are absolutely rock solid on their relationship with each other. And that has kind of allowed them to survive. And so the book kind of comes together when the sisters, who are living these kind of functional lives, receive a phone call saying that the foster home that they grew up in, a place in the country, has been demolished to build a McDonald's. And they, while excavating, have found the body of a small child underneath the old farmhouse. And so they are thrust back to that town to speak to the police and talk about their childhood, that everyone believes was quite picturesque and quite magical. But we find out that that wasn't the case at all. And we start to search into who the child is, and do the girls know anything about it? Are they victims or are they villains?
Mm-hmm. And there's their foster mother, who is such a fabulous character as well, Holly Fairchild. She's opens the door in her pink dress, and she's so positive. She looks like Barbie. One of the girls, is it Nora maybe, who sees her and is like, she looks like Barbie. And yet, of course, nothing is what it seems. And I noticed you said that you had the chance to speak to some kids who went through foster care. So obviously it's not, it's a very serious, it's a difficult and serious condition that obviously all of our countries deal with everywhere around the world. And yet, and you see that these girls they have gone through a lot. They are damaged, and they are also so resilient. And I think one of the things I love best about this book is the idea that hard things can happen to us, as they do. And yet we can not only survive them, but we can overcome them, and they can make us, and as it does with these girls, it makes them into the women that they are, which is so wonderful. So tell us about that experience of talking to those, the people you did and the research you did for this, because it is different in some ways than your other books.
Yeah, thank you. I where should I start? I just wanted to kind of touch on what you said about how resilience comes through in difficult times, and the real message that I got from speaking to these women, which I'll tell you about in a second, was that the resilience comes when you have at least one person that you can rely on. And it might be a foster parent, it might be a foster sibling, it might be an aunt or a social worker who cared about you. And that was really what I wanted to kind of come across through the relationships of these sisters in the book. And so, I think the most humbling part of writing this book, and perhaps any book that I've written, was speaking to 12 women, adults, all of them around my age, who had grown up in foster care as children. So they're not children when I spoke to them, but they, had come through and were the age of the characters that I wrote about. And the way that I got in touch with them was I put a message out on social media to say, does anyone know anyone? Would anyone be willing to speak to me? Foster children, foster parents, social workers. It's a really sensitive thing to ask people for. And, as an author, sometimes we are asking people to offer that kind of information. And when they do, and they're happy to give it, it's just the most humbling thing. So I spoke to 12 women, and every story different, every story devastating, in that they'd all found themselves in foster care. And I'd actually called an early version of this book The Lucky Ladies, which seems like a really odd name for a book that is about foster care. The reason I did that is because in all 12 interviews with these women, and the experiences ranged from the most horrific stuff that you can imagine, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and neglect, right through to what we might think of as a positive experience, in that the foster home was kind and they were still in touch and they were loving, and there were good relationships. In every single woman told me that she was lucky, and it might, or that used the word lucky, and it may have been, sometimes it was in a horrific circumstance. They were lucky because they were only sexually abused once. I heard the word lucky there. And I also heard lucky that they received love. And it occurred to me that, in fact, even the best situation, they were not lucky, because they found themselves in foster care. They lost a parent, or they found themselves with a parent that was unable to care for them. And so while it seems like a good thing for people to consider themselves lucky, and it might tell us that, they've got a positive outlook, that's how they survived, I started to think, maybe that's a negative thing, to make these people believe that they're lucky to have received the most basic care that we deserve and that we would want for our children, which is love, a roof over your head, food, continued care. Like, imagine I went to my daughter Eloise, she doesn't think she's lucky because she has a mum and dad who love her, and thrusting that idea of luckiness on a small child, I actually think can do some damage. And that's, again, there were so many stories, of which some of them made into the book, and with permission always, but really it was the ethos of what it does to expect a child to feel lucky for what they and every child actually deserves. That was,
and you use that beautifully in the book. It is you weave that into the story, because it's absolutely right. And I think it's sort of like everybody in those situations sort of forces this like half full attitude on these children, right? Like, oh, but you have a home, even if it's a really shitty one, or you have, it's all this stuff. And I love the way that comes across in the book. And I'm not going to tell you about it because you have to go read it. But I mean, not you, obviously, Sally, you've read it, but I'm talking to everybody else. But that is beautiful. And so what was it that sort of prompted you? Because your stories have been mostly about, really domestic, a family, siblings, mothers-in-law and such. What sort of prompted this? It's not, I mean, you said this is your wheelhouse, but a little bit of a departure.
Yeah. Well, as I said, it is families. Usually I start with the family relationship, and then I get into, who gets murdered, who's dead.
Important.
But this time I've kind of done a lot of the family relationships, or the ones that had immediately come to mind. And this one started with a news article that I read about a little girl who went missing from foster care when she was 3. And then skip forward to, 20 years, and I'm telling the story badly because I'm giving away the ending, but a woman was watching TV and she saw this program on missing children, and one of them looked exactly like her. And she had been adopted, and she knew that, and she hadn't known what had happened to her. And she thought, that's me, that person.
Wow.
And she went and looked into it, and then she ended up doing a DNA test and proved that she was, in fact, this missing child. And I thought, and this was in the States, and I was just blown away by this story. And I then started looking into missing children in foster care. And unfortunately, across the world, Australia and America, so many children go missing from foster care every year. And so, and because in many cases they run away, a lot of them aren't found, and there's assumptions are made, and it makes them such a vulnerable group to be taken advantage of or whatnot. And so I thought, oh, this is interesting, and I could do something with this. But do I want to go there? And you sort of, I sat on it for a little while. And then I sometimes think, and I'm the least airy-fairy person you can imagine. I'm actually a very straight-laced, cynical Australian woman. But I kind of think that there sometimes is a bit of magic and a little bit of the universe pushing you in a certain direction. And I kept thinking about it. At the same time, a friend of a friend started fostering children. And I kept hearing these stories about her and the kids she was fostering, and I was so interested in it. And I remember my friend telling me that she'd fostered 2 little boys who came from 2 different families. They were 6 and 8 years old, and they had really formed an attachment with each other and had started calling each other brothers at school and to their friends. And it just made me think about that, what we talked about earlier, that need to form a connection. And if you don't have someone there, a sibling or someone that makes it feel like family, you seek it out. Human beings are so we know what helps us survive, we know what's good for us. And it really did got me thinking about, could that happen if I did write about foster care? Maybe there could be 2 or 3 sisters who forge this kind of relationship. And once you've got the 2 pieces, there was a missing child, and then there could be this sort of non-biological familial relationship. It was a way, and I knew it was too late. I had to write this book.
Oh yeah, and I think it's an interesting point. Like, it is there's a whole different layer of sort of darkness to the story because of where the 3 girls come from. And the environment they're in. But I think it's like you said, it's important, I think, to write these stories. And you talk about interviewing these women, and sort of, it's an honor to hear their stories, and I think it's also, and of course the crime happened in America. There's no question that it happened here, but I do think it is such a gift for people, because of course our readers are also people who know people who came from foster care or came from foster care, or or have never experienced foster care, but to understand it in a way. This is what I always think is a gift about a thriller, right? It's a fun story to read. It's it's a total entertainment, and yet at the end of the day, you understand somebody's life just a little bit better, and that is what. And I think we do. I'm going to say this, and again, I don't hate men as the killer women, but I think women writers do that particularly well. We understand sort of the nuance that happens when people connect, rely on each other, and how important that is. And I think as women, we do that. We just do that differently than men. I won't say better. I'm thinking it, obviously, but I'm going to say it.
I'm going to say better. I'm going to own that.
I mean, we allow ourselves to be, and these girls did that too. Their vulnerability. First of all, the vulnerability is obvious because they're in foster care, but each of them has a vulnerability that they let the others see. And we won't talk too much about it because it is really special to the story. And even Jessica, who's that like type A, totally organized, there's little cracks in her that only her sisters really get to see because she only really shows them. And I love that. I love the way these 3 understand and appreciate and support each other, even though they're so different, right? And that's something you don't always get with like actual siblings, I think.
That's true. Although my kids definitely fall into that category of being very, very different from each other.
Well, yeah, but not necessarily supportive of each other. Like, I think siblings can be very different. No. But right, I think sometimes this sort of forced, created sibling is even stronger.
Yes, exactly. And I was just thinking, from what you were saying, the other thing that I really wanted to, challenge in this book was the idea that, and challenge it because of my own thoughts that I've had in the past, is this idea that foster care is something, it's too hard. The system's broken. What can we do? And throw up our hands. And that's something that I have done, and thought many times. And yet I think that it's kind of lazy to do that, because the truth is that foster kids are not someone else's problem. They belong to all of us. in
Right.
society, and they are wards of the state. And anyone who has had their own children, and many people who haven't, can see, if you, as soon as you put your own children into that perspective and think, what is the care that I would want for them
Right.
when, if something happened to me, then you can take on these children as our own. And by that, I don't kind of mean that we need to guilt people into taking on a foster child. You know, I
Right.
have never done that. I'm certainly not, you know, proclaiming that, you know, I've figured it all
Right.
out. But our job as writers is to highlight these things. This is a really problematic, really difficult area, because these kids don't have parents advocating for them. It's
Right.
not like a cancer society or you know, another kind of childhood illness where there are these passionate parents advocating. These kids don't have parents to advocate. And so if we in some small way can shine a light, I really want to do that. And the best messages I've had from here in Australia, where the book's already been released, has been from people who've read the book and inquired about how to become a foster parent, how to raise money for foster children, you know, how to volunteer, and all of those messages have been really heartwarming.
That's the power of books, right? It's so fabulous, is that books, they really do change us, you know, because if we, and I think fiction in particular, of course, I'm super biased on that as well, but I feel like, you know, you get a chance to see the way somebody else lives, and it helps us sort of assimilate those experiences to our own experience, which can be so different. And to your point about children, they not only do they not have anybody to advocate for them, but we, you know, it's like in this country, the kids the immigrant kids who were separated from their parents, and it's, you know, these aren't fully formed humans who can manage things on their own. I mean, some of them were infants, but even the ones who are, you know, 16, 17, they're not prepared to be released on their own. They need so many things, and they need them for, you know, for the full, and even when you're 18, which you do beautifully as well with Erin, that, you know, that because there are, you know, current foster children in these women's lives, and we again won't say much more about that. But again, like, you know, they age out at 18, but really, like, who is really ready to be like fully independent and to figure out how to get to university or you know, training school or anything at that age, right?
And oftentimes they're released, if they turn 18 in their final year of school, they are let go from if the foster parents don't keep them. And I say this without judgment, because, you know, I don't know the situation that every foster carer has been in, but their funding stops and the child is released into the world, you know, the midway through school, and, you know, potentially has to go and get a job, and
and not even finish school.
And which is just, and I don't, as I said, the foster carers, some of them are not so great as they are in the book, but also, gosh, I mean, there are heroes who are out there being foster carers, and I feel like it's important to say that, because it's very easy for me to sit here. I am not doing it, and thank goodness for the people that we have out there just doing this really difficult job. Yeah.
I mean, it is all the people who take the sort of really important hard jobs. It's foster care, it's teachers, it's the people that are, you know, helping our social workers our young people become, you know, healthy participants in society as adults. Like, that takes a lot more, and we don't, of course, give it the finance, the resources, or anything that it deserves. So I'm with you, and I think it's beautiful that you're exploring something that is a hard topic, and you're seeing that people are responding. You know, I hope here in America you get a similar response, because I'd like to think that we're all vested in how children turn out everywhere, right?
Yeah, I hope
so. Absolutely. So your book, this is such a funny thing that we talk about sometimes with you know, the Australian versus American. Like, the book came out when in Australia? It's been out for 6 months.
September. Yeah.
It's because I remember seeing that, and I was like, when's my copy coming? So and then, of course, so you're and that is, of course, understandable. Like, it's publishing schedules, and everybody does the best they can do. I'm not faulting the publishers. I'm just saying, we are all like, give us our copy. But now you're
well,
go ahead.
I'm trying to sync those dates up, because it is a bit. In fact, I was saying before the interview started, this is my first American interview. So I kind of did the Australian tour and then put it down. I've been working on another book, and now I'm back again. And I'm so excited to get the book out to the American and North American audience. But I've had to brush up again on
I know,
get back
right?
into my darling girl's hat.
That's what I was talking to another author who she was like, we couldn't remember the name of the mother, like a sideline mother. And she's like, it's true, because you're already writing a totally different book, right? I mean, you are.
Yeah.
So can you share with us a little bit about what you're working on? And you can say no, but if you are able to, we always love to hear teasers.
It's pretty new, but I'll tell you that a little bit of inspiration was this very elderly woman who came up to me at one of the Australian events for Darling Girls, and she was 93, and she came with her daughter and her granddaughter, and she'd read all my books, and she came up and she said, "Do you know what's interesting? Of all the people who commit murder in the world, people never suspect little girls or old women." And I thought, that's true. And she said, and most people say that it's because those two groups of people don't murder people. But I think it's just that they're really good at getting away with it.
You're like, do you have a story you want me to tell? That is so 93. Yeah, I cannot wait to see what you spin out of that one. That is so fun. Is the book going to be called The Grandmother? Because I almost feel like
well, it features a little girl and her very elderly neighbor that lives across the road, and a friendship that they start, and a past that the elderly woman has, and a future that the little girl has, and there's some murder in there. And it actually opens with that line about the little girls and the grandmothers, because I thought that's a really fun concept.
So I'm sure she will be tickled when for her 94th birthday or 5th birthday, she gets a copy. That is so fun, Sally. Yeah. Well, you do. So I mean, it's fun that to hear how your brain takes an idea and twists it. Can you tell us just a little bit about how your schedule? Obviously, you do so many fun things. You have your I always love your fashion. What's the name of the company there the fashion designers that you always are talking about?
Well, I really mix it up. I've got a real passion for any female-run business, but particularly fashion is such an interest of mine. And so I really try to promote Australian small business, because they don't have the kind of marketing budget of Zara or Anthropology or all of those kind of things. So I actually don't just stick with one particular one. Anyone who sends me something that I like, and if I can give them a bit of a boost, then I will. I don't take money for it. I just like to kind of help out female businesses, and I get some clothes, and people that follow me love to see them, and it's just a bit of fun. I really enjoy it.
I recently checked out that you got a robe recently that was just fabulous. So I was thinking of that one, and then also the one I love is the one that your green dress that is your author picture is from the other one. If you don't already follow Sally on social media, you have to, because she has all these fun tips, and you can write her with your biggest problems, and she'll do a Dear Sally, and she will get you all squared away, which I love. Sally, you're going to probably get a letter from me.
I've got a good one this month.
Oh, good. Oh, do you?
Yes, this month, actually, you'll love this. This month was from a writer. I can't see who it is. My assistant sends it to me. I don't even know if the person says who they are, but it was from a writer who'd written an autobiography, and she had included her husband's infidelity in it, and they were still married, and it was 10 years later, and he had read it, and he was upset with her and thought she should take it out, and she was wondering if she should have, and I was on the fence, but everyone's come back, because I asked for a bit of feedback from my readers. I tell them to weigh in, and everyone was very clear that no, he did it. It's in the book. So I'm just about to craft my response for that.
I love that. So Sally, my next book, this is very off topic, but I'm writing a book called Deceived, which is based on my story. It's based on my husband's 2.5-year affair. We're subsequently divorced, and it is the beginning scene is the older daughter of their family accidentally shoots and kills this woman who ends up being the mistress, and then it's like everybody has a secret. That does not happen in real life. Nobody has died here, but it just occurred to me that like a lot, right? No, we won't kill anyone in real life. It's much more fun to kill in fiction. At least it's been, at least I don't really know, but that's what I'm
Agreed.
but I realize it's a way to explore these these long relationships, the things that happen, the children, the family. I'm going to sort of step into Sally's backyard and start to sort of pull apart this family, but it was 100% inspired, by my own life. So I say, if it happened to you, you own it. It belongs to you.
Yes, and Anne Lamott had a fabulous quote about how it's something, I'm going to paraphrase, but something about you own your own stories, and if people want to be portrayed better, they should have behaved better.
That's exactly, I know exactly that, and I believe that is 100% true. And actually, to give him some credit, which I don't often do, my ex-husband's like, of course you're going to write about it. That makes total sense to me. This is what you do. And I'm like, well, I'm glad we're on the same page. Thank you. And, and he's like, I look forward to reading it, which I think is really strange, but okay. So anyway, I love that. I love that idea. And sorry to interject, but I was like, this is like and I think and not that there's any of you in the, in a foster care system or in any of your books, but, or at least not in the sort of major plot things, but of course we pull what we know from being mothers, daughters, wives, it's just, we pull from our real experience. Did you lose it? You lost an earpod,
but I could still hear you. Yes. Yeah, we do. Of course we do. And I also am recently separated from my husband, as you know, and I'm not writing a book about divorce right now, but I think that you can't help but take, not just the experience, but the new perspective that you get from the things that we live through, and the wisdom from it, I suppose, or that can't help but make its way into our books. And I am actually quite glad that I'm not promoting The Soulmate, my most recent book, which is about, a husband that, and a cliff that he falls off, because that would kind of be awkward.
That would be right. Well, hopefully your ex doesn't fall off a cliff anytime soon. So or that you're in a different country when it happens. Hopefully you're
right.
Well, we won't. We could go there. That's how our minds work, but we will not go there. So everybody, darling girls, by Sally Hepworth, and she is, like, as you can see, Sally is so fabulous. If you haven't read her, you don't follow her, you don't get to chat with her regularly, you have to try to do all of those things because she's so fun. And go see her. Where is your tour schedule? I'm sure it's on your Instagram.
Yes, it's on Instagram. It's on my website. I'm going to be in New York and St. Louis and Minneapolis and Indianapolis and Waco, Texas, home of Chip and Joanna. I'm so excited. Houston. I'm going to forget them all, but they're up on my website, and I would love to see anyone who wants to come along.
Yeah, and
where I might hug you. I'm a hugger.
I love that. Well, I think that's so fabulous. And of course I'm in Montana, so I'm never at anywhere where I can get to people. Turns out there's just not a lot of really big bookstores in Montana. So, so if you, unless you want to
work on that.
Yeah, or you could come sign at a rodeo or something. Maybe you'll write a rodeo book one day, Sally, and we'll find you a big spot.
That's coming next. If it gets me to Montana, why not?
Exactly. Well, you're always welcome. Everybody, thank you so much for joining Sally and I today to talk about Darling Girls. Don't forget, there's a copy of this that will be available to win on the Killer Women Facebook page. And Sally, so much fun. In the meantime, everybody, happy reading, and we will see you next time. Bye.